All right, good morning, everyone. Sorry about the delay in getting started. We have a few technical difficulties today. Fortunately, we have our wizard of AV, Jonathan Silk, helping us, and I'm sure we'll get sorted out pretty soon. I am Jeff Peckrell, the coordinator of Forum and also a member of the Human Rights Working Group that produces Forum. I welcome you back to Forum. It is Women's History Month now, this month. While we don't have any topics related to that, unfortunately, we try to program around the different months that we celebrate here at the church, but this time we don't have anything specifically for Women's History Month. Before I get to today's speaker and topic, let me just talk to you about a few announcements, a few things that are coming up. Okay, here in this room today at 12:30, from 12:30 until about 2:30, we are having a very special event that this committee has produced. It's called the Apartheid-Free Communities Celebration. And we will have a few more words at that meeting from Dr. Michael Cooper, who is today's presenter, as well as a number of other speakers talking about the church's vote to be a apartheid-free community, which is an expression of solidarity with Palestinians, essentially. So please come back for that. I think it'll be a really good meeting. We have lunch and a lot of good speakers, some music, some poetry, and it'll be great. Okay, what else is coming up at Forum? Well, a week from today, I'll be presenting, which I have not done at Forum before. I am going to give you some highlights and insights from some traveling I did recently. I was in the deep south of the US on what's known as a civil rights tour. So I went to a lot of important places where events from the civil rights movement happened, and I thought it was really impactful. And I want to tell you about that next Sunday. On the 23rd, a little bit of a change of pace, okay? We have Janet Kessler. She is known as the Coyote Whisperer, and she's an animal rights, an animal lover, I should really put it that way, person here in San Francisco who works with the coyotes, the wild coyotes who try to cohabitate with us here in this dense metropolis. And on March 30th, we have the Answer Coalition speaking. And then on April 6th, we'll be moving into Earth Month. Earth Day is in April, so we are trying to program around ecology, the environment, and things like that. So we have a presentation that Larry Danos has helped us find, and that is Paul Hughes from Forests Forever. All right, so that's all the announcements I have about upcoming things. Just talking about way we conduct Forum, we like to do Q&A at the end, so please make use of the cards and the pens on your tables to write the questions that we'll take up at the end. I also want to urge you that if you have any contrarian opinions about the presentation today, please don't hesitate to share them in the questions. That's all welcome. We want that if it makes sense. And of course, we want to be civil in our discourse and respectful of all presenters. Let's see. I think with that, we're ready for our Ohlone land recognition. So Dolores, please do that.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, everybody. We, the members of the First Unitarian Universal Society of San Francisco, acknowledge the Ramaytush Ohlone people, who are the ancestral custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Ramaytush Ohlone elders, past, present, and future, who call this place, the land that our society rests upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We recognize that as the original stewards of this land, the Ohlone and many other indigenous peoples have understood the connectedness of all life and maintained harmony with all of nature for millennia. We honor and thank them now for their enduring commitment to our Mother Earth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dolores. Okay, today's speaker, we have two speakers actually. We have Nadia Mashasha, who is representing an organization called HEALPalestine, and she'll be telling you all about that, what the good work that they do. And we have Dr. Michael Cooper, who has written a book of historical fiction, and his book is for sale at the back, and all proceeds of the sale of this book will benefit HEAL, and we welcome you to support this great organization by buying the book, by donating directly as well. And of course, we'll have an opportunity to do this at the meeting this afternoon as well. So just a few words now about Michael. I don't have a bio for Nadia, so she'll have to introduce herself when she comes up in just a moment. Michael Cooper is the author of novels of historical fiction set in the Holy Land at major turning points of history. He is also a pediatric cardiologist. After a 40-year career at UCSF Medical Center, continues to volunteer his service to Palestinian children who lack access to care, most recently with HEALPalestine, which is a nonprofit organization with core principles of health, education, aid, and leadership dedicated to healing, helping, and empowering Palestinian children in Gaza and the West Bank to rebuild their lives. Since we're still having a few technical challenges with Michael's presentation deck, Nadia will present first. So at this time, I'd like to welcome you to the podium, Nadia.
As Jeff said, my name is Nadia Mashasha, and thank you for having me here this morning. A little bit about myself. I am born and raised in the Bay Area. I am a product of the local public school system. Lived here all my life. My background is I'm a Palestinian American, also half Indian, and pretty much my background includes public health has been my background for the longest time. And I have been volunteering with HEAL since its inception for the past year. Prior to HEAL, there was a previous organization still existing called the PCRF, or the Palestine Children Relief Fund. And I have been volunteering with them for a couple of years as well. So I'm very, very involved with humanitarian work, specifically humanitarian work that involves helping injured children coming from the Middle East, specifically Gaza and other parts of Palestine. So as Jeff mentioned, I'm here to talk to you about what HEAL is all about. And HEAL stands for Health, Education, Aid, and Leadership. And the great thing about HEAL is that, you know, the founder of HEAL, Steve Sosebee, worked with the Palestine Children Relief Fund for over 30 years. And it's an excellent organization that is geared towards helping injured children. But basically what happened with the development of HEAL, which actually started during the onslaught that happened after October 7th, is that Steve and his team thought about the fact that, hey, obviously kids that have their legs blown off or lose an eye or, you know, injured in catastrophic ways need medical treatment to be able to be functioning individuals, functioning human beings. But there's also much more to that. There's a mental health aspect. There's the educational aspect. A lot of these kids end up missing out on their education because they are trying to survive and get over their injury. And then the other aspect is, what is the future of this child that's injured, that has lost their limb, that has lost their eye, that is in many cases, in most cases, lost their entire family. So that's why Steve came up with the concept of health, education, aid, and leadership to kind of address the holistic approach, the entire child, and different aspects of the crisis that happens in these children's lives. So this is a video from Steve Sosebee.
We were compelled to start HEALPalestine, witnessing the extent of the genocide that began in October in Gaza. The complete destruction of the Gaza Strip and the impact that it had on the over 1 million children in Gaza left us feeling that there was much more we could do. I'm Steve Sosebee, co-founder and executive director of HEALPalestine. HEALPalestine was founded with 4 main pillars: health, education, aid, and leadership. The health system in Gaza has been completely destroyed, so our organization is coming in and addressing needs on the ground related to health that we can help address and improve the quality of care for patients. In education, the entire education system has been destroyed in Gaza. Children are not getting any form of education. HEALPalestine is providing not only makeshift classrooms now, but will be part of the rebuilding of the education system in the future. Right now, people in Gaza are starving. They're living without shelter. 90% of the population are displaced. There's lack of clean drinking water. Our organization is on the ground providing that direct aid to people in need. And finally, in the Leadership Mentorship Program, our goal after the genocide is over and the rebuilding of Gaza starts is to rebuild the lives of our children in Gaza who've lost limbs, who've lost parents, to provide them mentorship, guidance, education, mental health, vocational training, to give them a sense of self-worth and independence. Every day we see children being killed, their parents being killed, their homes being destroyed, children starving, children in the streets looking for food, kids going without education, and we feel hopeless and even helpless, but we're not. There are organizations like HEALPalestine out there doing good work that you can be a part of and you can contribute to. Be part of the healing process. The children in Gaza deserve better lives. They deserve a better future, and the only way we're going to give them a better future is by actively working to heal their wounds and to give them hope and love.
So as Steve Sosby, our founder, mentioned, Heal Palestine, the H stands for health, which supports the needs of the health sector in Palestine. As many of you already know, due to the Israeli military operations since October 7th, basically there is barely much of a health care system in Gaza left. The E stands for education, to rebuild Gaza's education system, because again, basically there aren't any standing schools. And in fact, many, if there are any remnants, bombed out schools left over, they have been used as shelter for displaced Palestinians. The A in aid, the A stands for aid, to provide essential humanitarian aid with a focus on Gaza. The L stands for leadership, and as I mentioned earlier, we want to have help the acute needs of the children of Gaza, but the leadership aspect is focusing on the fact that, hey, these kids are going to grow up, hopefully, and we want them to grow up to become productive, thriving individuals in the future. So we don't want to just leave them hanging, basically. So from the short-term needs of feeding children, which is the aid aspect, to treating injured children, which is the health aspect, and providing health services, educating children in makeshift classrooms, and distributing aid to the long-term goals of helping rebuild health services, and the education system, and providing children with futures. HEAL is on the ground leading efforts to support Palestinians, especially in Gaza. So again, the whole idea behind HEAL is having a holistic, comprehensive, grassroots approach as a nonprofit humanitarian organization. So this is the idea of HEAL in a nutshell. Also, some basic numbers about HEAL. So we have so far 2 kitchens providing more than 5,000 meals daily in Gaza prior to the ceasefire. And we're hoping to open up another 8 kitchens post-ceasefire. Again, as you know, things are wobbly. It really depends on how things develop, right? So we have been having these healing kitchens that provide nutritious meals to the displaced families in Gaza. And depending on the climate of the political situation, we hope to continue with some more kitchens. One jewel that we have been able to establish is a field hospital, because of the fact that 90% of the health infrastructure in Gaza has been destroyed. It was very, very important to build a field hospital. So we were able to do that and serve hundreds of thousands of patients since June 2024, and that is still standing. Like I mentioned, we have educated hundreds of displaced Gazan children in our classrooms. I'll talk a little bit about more details about all these numbers. Hundreds of Gazans have been treated by our mental health programs monthly. So far, we have brought 31 children for treatment in the United States, which the way that I describe bringing a child out of Gaza, outside of Gaza to any country, let alone the United States, is kind of like finding a needle in a haystack. It's less than 4% of kids are able to get out. So, it was a representative from the UN that mentioned that Gaza has the largest cohort of pediatric amputees in modern history. So unfortunately, these 31 kids that came on, not all of them have amputations, by the way. Most of them have amputations, but a lot of them have burns. They have lost their eye, different types of injuries. But these are the very, very lucky ones. These are the exception rather than the rule. There's the rest of these children, and also, of course, there's adults that have these type of injuries that are not going to receive any kind of treatment and have to kind of fetch for themselves. So, we wish we can help more, but this is the capacity that we're able to do. A growing community of greater than 1,000 volunteers across the globe serving. I myself I'm a volunteer. I do have my day job and my family, but I'm committed to this humanitarian need because these children need a voice, and the world needs to know what's going on. And there's been so many instances in history where there's been carnage and there's been genocide and there's been so much destruction. And the great thing about HEAL, it's a glimmer of hope to help these kids. Someone asked me earlier which hospitals are involved. We have a network of over 20 US hospitals providing treatment for free, and that network is growing. And by the way, a lot of times it's not that easy for, like I said, it's less than 5%, right? There's lots of steps to trying to get a child to get accepted for treatment here in the United States or abroad. So sometimes individual doctors within hospitals want to help, but when they take a particular case of a child that's been injured in Gaza to the hospital board is like, hell no, we're not going to deal with this because of political issues, right? So in many cases, individual doctors, from the goodness of their heart, because they're humanitarians, they provide these medical services pro bono, such as Dr. Cooper himself. So we are so thankful for the angels out there in the world that provide these services for free. So going back to the H in HEAL, so our health projects are mental health programs in Gaza and Egypt. So since, again, the infrastructure is not very much there in Gaza, as much as we can do, we do in Gaza. We also have services in Egypt because, as you know, a lot of the displaced Gazans have gone to Egypt. So we are trying to go to where they're at and meet them where they're at to help them. So we have mental health programs in Gaza and Egypt. The Global Healing Program is what I have mentioned already so far. And what the Global Healing Program is essentially is the concept of bringing children from Gaza to outside Gaza for medical treatment, whether they go to Qatar, whether they go to Jordan, or they come to the United States. Another aspect of our health projects is supporting medical missions of doctors to Palestine. As I mentioned, Dr. Cooper has graciously been part of such missions. And we've had several local physicians donate their time and donate their precious time and energy and services and travel to Palestine, which is not exactly the safest thing to do, right? So they put their lives on the line and they go and donate their time to provide life-saving missions and life-saving operations. So we are, eternally indebted and grateful for these individuals. And lastly, as I had mentioned, and I'll talk more about those details, is a field hospital in Khan Yunis. And I'm taking a little bit too long, so I'll speed up a little bit. Okay, so a little bit more details about the field hospital that I'm talking a lot about. As I mentioned, 90% of Gaza's healthcare system has been destroyed. So you don't have normal medical care. You don't have hospitals for women to go give birth. You don't have hospitals for babies to go get their immunizations. You don't have hospitals for individuals to go and get basic care if they have an infection. They, need basic care that doesn't exist. So in response to this need, HEAL created in June 2024 this field hospital in Khan Yunis. So within that field hospital, over 500,000 patients have been treated. We have an emergency department there, 2 operating rooms, a maternity ward. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Maternity ward, pharmacy, laboratory service, radiology services, multiple specialty outpatient clinics. So these are just some of the services that this particular hospital, the only field hospital has. Thank you for the offer of water, but I'm fasting today, so thank you so much. Next slide. So a little bit more about the Global Healing Program. These are a few pictures of some of the children that are being treated in the United States. So basically, as I mentioned, this is the concept of bringing children here, injured children to the US for treatment. This is not updated. We have 31 children that are being treated in the United States. We have 9 children who have completed treatment. So a lot of people say, well, how long does it take? It just depends on so many factors, right? It's not that easy to bring a child out of there, and not just only the child, whoever is going to go along with that child. They need a companion, right? So a lot of times it's either the mom or the dad, not usually the dad, because it's harder for a male to get out of Gaza. So a lot of times what happens is the child comes to the United States for treatment, and there might be a timeline for how long that child is going to be treated, but there's sometimes some hiccups. The provider might not be available as much because, again, usually this provider is providing services pro bono, so he or she may have some other priorities. The child might have a hard time adjusting and wanting to get those treatments, right? Like a young lady that's here for treatment, her name is Farah. You know, she had a hard time going to the doctor. She had a hard time building trust with the doctor to receive a prosthetic leg. So it's not that easy. It's you know, each child is different. Each child is, you know, different in their journey for recuperating. So these 9 children have completed treatment, and we also have children that are in Egypt that are getting treatment. And they are staying there and receiving treatment, education, and housing until they're able to go back. So I'm going to focus a little bit on Farah. To the right there, this is a picture of the young lady with the heel sign behind her. She lost her right leg and her right eye when she was at home, and an explosion went off in her home. And she lost several family members, and unfortunately lost her eye and her leg. And she, by the way, before this happened to her, was a journalist. And she was an aspiring journalist. And she was talking about what was going on in Gaza and so on and so forth. So basically, as I was mentioning earlier, when she knew that she's going to be leaving Gaza, she basically said, you know what, I don't want to be a journalist anymore, because she didn't want to jeopardize the possibility of her getting a treatment. Because being vocal about Palestine, you can many times become marked. Like myself, you know, I've talked about Palestine, advocated for Palestinian human rights, and my business and my family have been attacked for that. So, you know, there's some people out there that take being vocal about Palestine as being anti-Semitic, but that's not the case. You know, I have several Jewish American friends. I've been born and raised in the Bay Area, and part of who we are is we're very loving society. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there because it's always something that I just have to mention. So it applied to Farah as well, that she, you know, didn't want to continue being a journalist because of the fact that she was concerned about what her future might be when she goes back. Because she, even though she's here for treatment, when I asked her, so are you ready to stay here? She's like, no, I want to go back to Gaza because that's my home. So she doesn't want any problems when she goes back. So she's thinking ahead. Sorry. Anyway, so these are just like a snapshot of some children. These are not all 31 children, but these are some of the children that have been, I don't know why the top left one is not showing, children that have been treated here in the United States. So as you can see, the majority of the injuries are amputations, unfortunately, and they range in age. Ahmed is actually here in Sacramento receiving treatment through Shriners Hospital. He's 15 years old, and he was in the fields picking vegetables when they were bombed. So he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just picking some vegetables with his cousin. His cousin died, and luckily he survived, but he lost his legs. Asad is 14. He had a leg amputation. He's in Massachusetts. Lian, 14, spinal cord injury. Walid, craniosynostosis, 1-year-old. We have another leg amputation, Shireen. Another amputation towards the end. And there's Sarah. So Sarah on the top left. Sarah, just really quick, I know I don't want to talk too long because I know that Michael has to make his presentation, but you know, these are, again, children, right? And Sarah was your typical 18-year-old, very addicted to TikTok, very addicted, very into herself, taking videos of herself, posting pictures of herself on TikTok, very into her hair and her appearance. And now look what happened to her. She has 60% of her body covered in burns. So that's one another story. We have Hadi, 13, leg amputation, Tala, 14, eye injury, Taleen. So the names and the injuries go on. And like I said, this is just a tip of the iceberg. This is a video of Shireen learning to walk on her new prosthetic leg. And that's Farah, the young lady that is currently here in the Bay Area that's receiving treatment. So again, it's the same, each individual child, their experience is different, of course, but you just saw the video of Shireen, another child who lost her leg, that it was a video of her walking for the first time with a prosthetic. So we had a similar video of Farah, who's here in the Bay Area now, receiving treatment for various doctors. One of them is at UCSF. You also have local doctors, Hanger's Clinic actually provided that prosthetic limb. And then we have a wonderful doctor that provided her with a prosthetic eye. So again, this is a young lady who, is concerned about the way that she looks. She has her hand that basically is all messed up, and she's receiving some surgery to make it look better and function better. Because again, she's concerned with appearances since she's a young lady. So let me move a little bit to talk about the educational aspect. This is the E in HEAL. So we had some classrooms for displaced Gazans and Khan Yunis. And again, as I say, with the political situation, we adjust as much as possible to address the need for education for these displaced children. Post ceasefire, we're opening up an expanded version in North Gaza. Another beautiful thing that we do is, again, we are going to where the displaced Gazans are as well. As much as we can help on the ground in Gaza, we are, but we're also trying to help the displaced Gazans in Egypt, because that's where a lot of them are. So we have Montessori learning centers in Egypt, and Steve Sosby was just there recently meeting with educational professionals to help establish services there as well. And that was in September, actually, when HEAL partnered with educational programs in Egypt for students grades 1 to 5. Another really cool thing is that HEAL started a touring program for Tawjihi students and will provide support for future opportunities. What Tawjihi is in the Middle East, basically, it's an educational system. It's very similar to in the Israeli healthcare, in the Israeli educational system. I think it's called what is it called? There's a similar test in the Israeli educational system. So Pagrut, yeah, exactly. So basically what it is that children in high school have to choose which stream they want to go to. If they want to go to like a liberal arts focus or a scientific focus. And it's really a huge exam that basically students need to pass in order to graduate. They can't just get their degree, their high school diploma. They need to also pass this exam. So it's a very stressful exam. So they have, tutoring support for Tawjihi students. I think probably we'll just pass on the video. Another aspect is the aid aspect, our healing kitchens. We have 2 healing kitchens, one in Deir al-Bala, one in Khan Yunis. And a lot of people say, well, how do you do all this work if you can't get things into Gaza, and the trucks are limited and so on and so forth. So we do a lot of partnerships. So we've done some partnerships with World Central Kitchen, with Watermelon Relief. So there's different types of partnerships that we work with. So we have provided almost 200,000 meals prior to the ceasefire, and post ceasefire, we're going to continue doing this work as much as possible. Because again, people are starving. People are freezing to death. There's been children that have been freezing to death. So it's no joke. We still have a dire humanitarian crises happening in Gaza. So, yeah. That's the reality on the ground. So the aid aspect of HEAL, again, we do our best to distribute drinking water, hygiene packages, food parcels, especially now that it's the holy month of Ramadan. It's extra super duper important for people to get food. So we are trying our best to get out. Just a few days ago, we distributed some Ramadan parcels, which includes like traditional things that we break our fast with: dates, water, basics. Yeah, please. Are we good on time, Michael, or should I wrap it up?
Assalamu alaikum. Today we received at our
If you want to just pause
storage
for this video.
at our field hospital a shipment of clothes. Winter clothes is going to be for kids. As you know, winter right now on the door, and it's very cold, so we need to support our kids and our family with some clothes. We received a waterproof or tents, which is going to help a lot of families to cover their tents with this cold. And we received some blankets, which is very important. It's very cold right now out there. Please keep supporting our people over here in Gaza. And without your help, we can't do nothing. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
So basically, If you're more interested in learning about HEAL, I'm passing around, there's a little orange sheet right here that has a WhatsApp code. If you'd like to join our WhatsApp group to find out more about how to help, how to volunteer, how to attend our events, we're having an iftar fundraiser on March 22nd in Newark. If you're interested, if you're a medical professional and you'd like to donate your time, you can contact us. Also to host children that are here for treatment, we can connect with you to find out how we can work together. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and thank you so much, Dr. Cooper, for inviting me.
Thank you, Nadia, and welcome to all those here. And again, I want to extend a special thank you for trying to untie the Gordian knot of wiring here that we have. Jeff and Jonathan, I hope, have solved our issue. Perhaps we have. I don't know exactly how much time I have since this is something that kind of snuck up us and bit us. Thank you. Okay. Any event, we'll probably have to cut into the little of the Q&A at least. But let me begin by saying that I will also be referencing the horrific situation in Gaza, because that's really why we're here, not necessarily to talk about historical fiction, although it's riveting. It nevertheless is important insofar as it intersects with the reality that we're witnessing and some people are living through today. But what we want to really do is to raise awareness and to raise funds for Heal Palestine in its mission to alleviate the unspeakable misery being inflicted on the Palestinian people in the occupied West Bank and especially in Gaza. I appreciate that Nadia has represented HEAL here, because this is a wonderful 501c3 charity that's, and you see what it's been doing, and it'll continue to do it with your support. And hopefully we'll have time for some questions afterwards for Nadia and myself. So if we're here to talk about Palestine, why am I here? And why am I going to speak with you about historical fiction? The reason I'm here is that as a pediatric cardiologist, I've been doing volunteer medical missions for almost 20 years for Palestinian children without access to care. And I'm going to speak to you about historical fiction, since for about the same 20 years or so, I've been publishing books of historical fiction set in the Holy Land, insinuating messages of coexistence and peace between people in that troubled region. I'll also be teasing out some interesting bits of hidden history, that is, little-known historical facts to inform the present, and thus there may be some hope to resolve what appears to be a horrible and insoluble chronic conflict. In this goal, I'm inspired, thank you, by the advice of the wonderful author Richard Powers, who wrote in his book, The Overstory, the following sentence: "The best arguments in the world won't change a single person's mind. The only thing that can do that is a good story." So I try to write good stories. And whether or not it's the story that Nadia told us or the stories that I tell, the main thing is to tell a good and compelling story. The other thing is this other sentence from the great Spanish-American philosopher George Santayana that everybody is familiar with: "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And as we look around today, we indeed see the worst of history's mistakes being repeated: war, genocide, both in Europe and in the Middle East. Clearly, too many people don't seem to remember the past, or it's that the past has been hidden from them, or that the past has been willfully distorted. Because of this, it's been my goal in writing historical fiction that I might inspire readers to seek out accurate and complete historical accounts, and by so doing, to remember the past, to remember history. Let's start with the covers of the books. Next slide, please. As you can see here, these are representations of Kaiser Wilhelm II hovering malignantly over the old city of Jerusalem. And indeed, both the Kaiser and Jerusalem are featured extensively in these books. However, if you look at the copy at the back of the book, if you purchase one later, You'll see that there's more going on here and that there's a rich weave of other characters, both historical and fictional. To give you a sense, the story of 16-year-old Evan Sinclair that began in Wages of Empire continues in Crossroads of Empire. Having survived German artillery, poison gas, and friendly fire in helping to turn the tide of the war in its first months, Evan barely survives his hospital ships sinking by a German U-boat. Left with amnesia, he no longer remembers who he is. Likewise, Evan doesn't recall that despite the war raging in Europe, the true source of conflict is emerging in Ottoman Palestine because, and this is historical, it's from Jerusalem's Temple Mount that Kaiser Wilhelm dreamed to rule as Holy Roman Emperor over Arabian oil reserves as well as the Suez Canal. In the book, the Middle East front soon explodes with pitched battles at Suez and Gallipoli as Evan's stories interwoven with those of historical figures such as the Kaiser, such as Gertrude Bell, T.E. Lawrence, Winston Churchill, Faisal bin Hussein, and Chaim Weizmann. Now what I'd like to do is give you a little example of uncovering a bit of hidden history. Next slide, please. In this first reading, which is dated June 11th, 1914, about 2 months before the start of the war, we find a British treasure hunter, Montague Walker, who had been summoned by the Kaiser to meet him at his palatial estate, the Achillean, on the island of Corfu. Anybody been there? No hands? I'll raise mine. It's really an impressive place. It's just off the Greek Ionian coast near the Albanian border. Walker had come by yacht docked at the Kaiser's pier, and he's been brought up the hill by carriage. After greeting the Kaiser and speaking about the Achillean and its connection with Achilles, Walker finally asks, "Sire, why am I here?" In response, the Kaiser nods toward a marble bench in a garden full of statuary, including a huge, next slide, statue of Achilles, and he answers the question that Montague Walker posed, "Why am I here?" Wilhelm looked out to sea and began to speak, softly and almost to himself. "I uphold a tradition of Holy Roman emperors that began with Charlemagne 1,000 years ago. Like Charlemagne and like Frederick before me, I am the Holy Roman Emperor. When I entered Jerusalem at the turn of the century as a guest of the Sultan, I also claimed the title that Frederick bore, that of King of Jerusalem." All this is historical fact. The Ottomans didn't care if I wanted to be king of Jerusalem, as long as I was willing to prop up their nominal control over what they believed to be their empire. And as for Jerusalem, Walker, I know the holy city holds a special place in your heart. It does, sire. It's my greatest wish to return and continue my excavation of the Temple Mount. Also historical fact. That is the reason you're here, Walker. It is indeed for the sake of Jerusalem and the full flowering of the Holy Roman Empire that I have summoned you, because Jerusalem will be the center of my Kaiserreich. Kaiserreich, sire? I don't understand. It's like this. Due to the efforts of my royal father and Otto von Bismarck, I inherited a unified Germany, the Kaiserreich, the flowering of the imperial German state, also known as the Second Reich. But I will push beyond it. The day approaches when I will add all of Arabia and Mesopotamia to my empire, with the diadem of Palestine and the crown jewel of Jerusalem. And on that glorious day, we will have forged the next manifestation of the Holy Roman Empire, the Third Reich, a German state that will thrive for 1,000 years. We'll pause there with the Kaiser having shown his cards. I must say that for historians and for writers of historical fiction, Kaiser Wilhelm provides a virtual buffet of bizarre character traits. Next slide, please. Listen, and next, click again. And listen to what, click again? Oh, there we go, good. And listen to what a German historian, Thomas Nipperdey, had to say about the Kaiser, and I quote, "While Wilhelm was gifted with a quick understanding, he was at the same time superficial, hasty, restless, unable to relax, without any deeper level of seriousness, without any sense of sobriety. He was arrogant, uncontrollable, without any concern for balance and boundaries, or even for reality and real problems. At the same time, he had a hyperactive sense of grievance and was desperate for applause and success. He was theatrical, with an exaggerated bravado and a desire to show off. As we read this description of the German Kaiser, just imagine what it would be like to live in the grip of a head of state, untethered by any restraint, who was able to rule by royal decree, next slide please, or by executive privilege, a monarch motivated only, click again, by the need to feed his own monumental ego. Click again, and again. We'll linger on that for a moment. The similarity is unsettling. And talk about history repeating itself. Okay. So, but let's return, next slide please. Let's return to that time and a part of the story that includes the Ottoman Empire's southern reaches. As you can see there on the lower left, if you're, or your right, the areas of Arabia and Palestine. Here the Arabs and early Zionists had specific concerns and significant interests. Next slide, please. First, the Hashemites. I'd like to give you an example, pardon me, first the Hashemites. The Emir Faisal and his father, the Sharif of Mecca, Hussein bin Ali, right, good. Here we find them in conversation about the gathering war. This is June 21, 1914, Mecca, the Ottoman province of the Hejaz. Faisal bin Hussein completed morning prayer and kissed his wife and 4 sleepy children before leaving his apartments within the walls of the holy precinct. Tall and slender, he wore a long robe of white silk. His brown headcloth was bound with cords of scarlet and gold, and his black beard accentuated the pallor of his face. Moving quickly over smooth paving stones, Faisal crossed the shadowed square toward his father's quarters, the air cool on his face. He glanced up to see the first rays of the rising sun illuminating the Kaaba, the most sacred site in Islam, originally built by the Prophet Ibrahim himself with help from his son Ismail. For millions of the faithful, a visit to the holy precincts was a once-in-a-lifetime pilgrimage, but for Faisal, it was commonplace. This was his home. He knocked on his father's door, which was opened by a servant, and he stepped in. "You summoned me, father?" "I summoned you half an hour ago, my son," Hussein said in a gentle rebuke as he rose from his seat on a light gray divan. He placed his hands on Faisal's shoulders, kissing him first on the left, then on the right cheek, and he asked, "What delayed you?" "My apologies, father. I received your note while at prayer and came as soon as I finished, pausing only to kiss my wife and little ones." "That is proper and praiseworthy, my son. I am pleased that you honor your family in this manner. Now that you are all back in Mecca, I'm delighted to be able to see so much of you and your beautiful children. It is well said that grandchildren are Allah's way of compensating us for growing old." As they sit down together, I'm skipping here, Faisal will ask, "Why did you summon me, father?" And his father answers, "I have suspicions about Germany's designs in Arabia. They have already constructed a railway from Berlin to Constantinople, and it's well known they hope to reach Baghdad and eventually the port of Basra." Faisal stood up and studied a large map hanging among rich tapestries along the walls of his father's study. "That will give Germany petroleum to fuel its navy and easy access to their colonies in East Africa." "You are correct on both counts, my son. Given this, my father, is it not to our advantage to forge closer ties with the Turks and Germans?" "I have considered this very issue, my son, and find that I am of 2 minds on the subject. This is the reason I wish to speak with you as I determine how to proceed. You should know that I have been in contact with the British General Kitchener in Cairo." "But father, we are citizens of the Ottoman Empire. This is high treason." "Yes, and punishable by death." "If these are the stakes, father, shouldn't we remain loyal to the Turks?" "I've been maneuvering with the Turks all my life, mainly arguing for self-rule." "My father," Faisal cut in, "since you've been so skillful in maneuvering with the Ottomans, why not continue? And with war on the horizon, we'll have even more leverage. All the more reason we should remain loyal to the Turks. It's not the Turks that concern me as much as the Germans, my son. Should war come, it's very likely that there will be an alliance between Turkey and Germany, and it is Germany that concerns me. Why? Kaiser Wilhelm. Hussein sat back and sighed. I met him twice in Constantinople, and on both occasions I found him to be quite unbalanced, either angry or arrogant, usually both. And in every conversation with him, he did all the talking and was always boasting. Faisal could see that his father was growing agitated as he spoke of the Kaiser. But why should we endanger our families and our fortunes? Because of him. He's only one man. He is one man who is very dangerous, Hussein shouted. He's an affront to everything we cherish. In the holy city, he had himself crowned King of Jerusalem, historical fact. He directed that an entire section of Jerusalem's ancient wall be removed so he could ride into the holy city on a white steed like a conquering hero, historical fact. It is manifestly clear to me that the Ottomans have become the Kaiser's puppets. The Caliph and the Young Turks don't seem to care that the Kaiser strikes at the very heart of our faith, but I do. He makes a mockery of Islam. Do you know that there are German agents even now spreading the lie that the Kaiser converted to Islam and is now a devout Muslim? Historical fact. And when war comes and Germany prevails with the help of Turkey, Wilhelm will rule over an empire extending from Europe into Asia. And in that vast empire, it will be the Kaiser we will have to contend with. As Faisal listened to his father, his heart filled with dread, and he began to despair of finding any argument to dissuade him from making such a traitorous arrangement against the Ottomans. Yet he took some solace in the feeling of his father's hand on his shoulder. My son, I know that the notion of turning against the Ottoman Empire frightens you. It frightens me also. But if we remain loyal to Turkey in alliance with Germany, and if this unholy alliance is victorious in the coming war, the Ottoman Empire will remain intact as a German vassal state, and we will find ourselves with two masters, the Turks and the Germans, with Kaiser Wilhelm reigning as a self-appointed king of Jerusalem, and we will never know freedom. And now, time allowing, I'd like you to meet two early Zionists, Chaim Weizmann and Asher Ginsburg. Let me stop here to acknowledge that for many here in this room and online, the very word Zionism is itself a hateful abomination, representing a vicious ideology that has brought untold suffering, displacement, and death to thousands of Palestinians. But please know that in the late 19th century and in the early 20th century, there was another face of Zionism, a Zionism that yearned for a return of Jews to Zion, or Palestine, if you will, but only in cooperation with and in honest friendship with and with respect for the Arabs living there. I know that this fact about the past, given the horrific present, is almost impossible to imagine, although many Jews feel this way today. They're mostly in JVP. But please open your ears to hear the words of these proponents back then of a far different ideology, and one that would have led to a far different present reality. Because it's my hope that more people throughout the world, and particularly Jewish people, will also come to know this, that there was and is another way, a better way to imagine the present. The main proponent of this ideology was Asher Ginsburg, a Ukrainian Jew, and he called it cultural Judaism. The next two short readings will highlight this alternative ideology. So here we have Chaim Weizmann, who was an early follower of Ginsburg's cultural Zionism as a biochemist, working with the British government to develop a biochemical process to produce acetone, which was a vital precursor to produce cordite, which was crucial for the British war effort. Because of this, he was tasked by Winston Churchill, when he was First Lord of the Admiralty, to switch distilleries in England from the production of alcohol to the production of acetone, because you don't want to mix those up. You certainly wouldn't want to have a sip of acetone. This reading is dated November 30th, 1914. London's East End. Chaim Weizmann awoke in his lonely flat on Oswald Road, stretched and looked out the window at the rising sun attempting to shine through the mist hanging over London's East End. Though up early, he wouldn't be going to work at the pilot plant today since the shipments of corn from the United States had yet to arrive. Apparently, the cargo ship had been delayed several days so that it could be included in a large convoy to provide a measure of protection from the German U-boats lurking in the Atlantic. The main thing is that the corn get through, Weizmann thought, knowing that all else was in readiness at the distillery to begin acetone production for making munitions-grade cordite. And once the pilot plant was fully operational, Churchill had already charged Weizmann with converting other distilleries for the production of spirits to the production of acetone. Much to the chagrin of distillery owners, the need for munitions in the grim struggle with the Central Powers trumped all, even spirits. The dreary morning didn't dim Weizmann's excitement at the certainty that his discovery of acetone synthesis would have a pivotal effect on the war effort. And I must admit, he thought, it also gives me access and leverage with the British Admiralty at Whitehall and elsewhere for the sake of Zionism. But he also understood that having leverage and knowing how to use it were two different things. And for this, Weizmann needed the advice of his old friend, Asher Ginsburg, one of the original leaders of the Zionist movement. Now that Weizmann was splitting his time between Manchester and London, he was able to see Ginsburg frequently to seek his counsel, and the increased proximity had also given Weizmann a glimpse of Ginsburg's inner turmoil and his predilection for melancholy, i.e. depression, a side of him he'd never seen before. Having decided to help his old friend, Weizmann had arranged for Ginsburg to come with him on his next trip home to Manchester, and that day was today. A taxi arrives to take Weizmann, and he has time to think on the way. As houses and telegraph poles ticked by the window, Weizmann leaned back in the embrace of the taxi's upholstery as his thoughts turned to Asher Ginsburg, how he had shaped the Zionist movement starting at the end of the 19th century when he was in his early 20s. At that time, Ginsburg had just moved from a small Ukrainian village to Odessa, where he had encountered two stark conflicting realities, a vibrant Jewish enlightenment and a rising tide of virulent anti-Semitism. Faced with the specter of deadly Tsarist pogroms, like riots where people were killed, Ginsburg was drawn to the Zionist promise of safe harbor for Jews in Palestine, and he joined the first and only Zionist organization of the time, Chovavei Tzion, or Lovers of Zion, enthusiastically embracing the group's goal of finding sanctuary for Russian Jews in Ottoman Palestine. However, when Ginsburg traveled to Palestine in 1891, what he observed in some Jewish settlements shocked him to the core. Jews who had lived like slaves beneath the iron fist of Tsarist Russia suddenly found themselves free. And some of them used their newfound freedom to inflict a ruthless tyranny over the native Arabs of Palestine. Ginsburg expressed his dismay in the Hebrew essays he wrote, essays with titles such as "This is Not the Way" or "Truth from the Land of Israel." With self-effacing modesty, he used the pen name Achad Ha'am, one of the people, in all his writings. These critiques of Zionism were widely read by Jews throughout the Russian Empire, and Weizmann was one of many young Jews whose ideas about Zionism were shaped by Ginsburg. We'll now skip forward as the taxi arrives at Ginsburg's home in London, and while Weizmann is waiting for Ginsburg to leave, he also has time to consider other issues. Let's see, and so he reflects also on what Ginsburg, what he learned from Ginsburg. Weizmann thought back to Ginsburg's essays, where he'd emphasized that the solution to the settlement of Ottoman Palestine involved an imperative to create a Jewish consciousness beyond the basic need of sanctuary, an imperative to internalize and live by the core Jewish values of compassion, truth, and justice, not commonly seen, sadly, in Israel today, especially when it came to dealing with the local Arab population. Having read and reread the essays, Weizmann remembered Asher's exact words, his unrestrained honesty in exposing what he had witnessed among some of the settlers in Palestine. They treat, this is quotation, they treat the Arabs with hostility and cruelty, deprive them of their rights, offend them without cause, and even boast of these deeds. So sadly, even these settlements at the end of the 19th century and early 20th century had people who behaved like this. And obviously that really soured the way things evolved. I'm going to skip forward to another. Yes. Okay. In that case, we won't skip forward to a conversation about the fact that Ginsburg's daughter had married a non-Jew and it upset him. And basically they got back to talking more about this type of awareness and consciousness about the way that they needed to return to Zion without displacing and certainly without humiliating the native population. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is kind of an important touchstone because these two leaders, oh, okay, you already blew it. Okay, very good. These two leaders here were brought together in May of 1914, at least in the book. And Lawrence, at 27 years of age, guided them in joining forces to cooperate and mutually support each other in their common struggle for independent homelands within what they anticipated would be the shattered remnants of the Ottoman Empire. This would be a struggle against French and British interests in the Middle East that would continue all the way to and beyond the peace talks in Versailles in 1919. Next slide, please. Just a quick quotation. This was another supporter of cultural Judaism, the gentleman here. And if you can read the quotation, it's very telling. This is his correspondence with other Zionists. If we are not able to find a way to honest cooperation and honest pacts with the Arabs, then we have learned nothing during our 2,000 years of suffering. Without honest cooperation with the Arabs, there is no peace and no security. And in another letter, another quotation, only direct cooperation with the Arabs can create a dignified and safe life. What saddens me is less the fact that Jews are not smart enough to understand this, but rather that they are not just enough to want it. Next slide, please. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with this wonderful author, Arundhati Roy, another voice in the choir of calling for a sane approach to Palestine. And these are some excerpts of a speech that she made when she received this particular award. You can read it yourselves. Suffice it to say that she ends this with a very powerful couple of sentences. Not all the power and money, not all the weapons and propaganda in the world can any longer hide the wound that is Palestine, the wound through which the whole world, including Israel, bleeds. Next, please. Okay, a couple of maps of Gaza. As you can see, it's a very small piece of territory. Next slide, please. If you look at the East Bay Strip, you know, between Alameda and Pinole, you're dealing with a very similar size population, not population, size area, but the population, as you can see, is more than double, and the population density is more than double. Next slide, please. 3 pillars for a better future. As you can see, first, it's based on truth and justice and Palestinian independence, and it really requires an honest acknowledgement of history on both sides, and it also requires repatriation, reparations, rapprochement, and reconciliation. And ultimately, Palestine independence. Click again, please. But right now, the need is for reconstruction and rehabilitation, as you heard from Nadia, because we need to heal a wounded land and a wounded people, and that's where HEAL comes in. Next slide, please. These are buildings before and after. This is the Islamic University of Gaza. It's absolutely a beautiful series of buildings before and after October 2023. Again. Stop here a moment. There's also wounded people. And you saw some, and you've seen pictures of many. If you need to avert your eyes, do so. There will be 7 pictures that I think are very evocative because they're poignant. It almost looks like a Pieta in many of them. It's really, really sad, not from the standpoint of the horror that these people are living through, but just seeing the nobility also in the midst of their suffering and their rage in the midst of their suffering. Next slide. And again. 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 Okay. Again. So I'm not going to touch on this Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is coming up on April 21st, but a commonly heard phrase is never again. And this never again is being stated and shouted by people in the midst of an ongoing genocide. Never again, really? It's happening before their eyes. This also marks apparently the 80th anniversary of the Auschwitz liberation, the 30th anniversary of Bosnian genocide, and, click please, the 2nd year of the Gazan genocide. And last slide, please. Again, thank you for your attention. We're sorry that it was a little rocky, but I'm glad that we got to communicate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadia and Michael. 2 amazing presentations. I really want to thank you for that. If you want to buy a copy of the book, please do so on the way out. You can also donate to HEAL on your way out. Please come back at 12:30. We're going to have a great celebration of our congregations becoming an apartheid-free community in this room. We'll have lunch, music, poetry, and a lot of great short speeches. So please come back at 12:30. Please come back next Sunday. I'll be doing a presentation about the Civil Rights Tour.
Also, all proceeds from book sales will be directly donated to Heal Palestine as well. So, but you're welcome to donate without the book.
We actually didn't have time for questions today, or there were very few, but there was one that I will raise, which is how to pronounce Gaza. Is that correct, Nadia? Gaza. That was what someone asked. Thank you so much, everyone.